I think that, like, okay, so as a person who's very fond of the, not fond, but I respect what the forefathers foresaw when they wrote the amendments and the Bill of Rights. And what I think is most interesting.
Wait, is this about Harvey Weinstein?
Oh no! I'm talking
Okay.
I'm talking about guns and shit like that.
Okay, good.
But when Harvey Weinstein ratified the Constitution,
That was his freedom of speech, okay?
but
freedom to press his dick up against his actresses.
that's what they meant, right? But like, I think that what they understood when they wrote those amendments, and I think it's one of the reasons why that people have been pushing back against freedom of speech and freedom to bear arms and things like that. And I obviously understand that there are certain, outlier situations where these arguments come to their limits. But I think in the general argument of things that they should be respected is that we grew up in a time, we didn't have any, we grew up in a time, particularly millennials, where there never really was an actual threat to our, like in a worldwide
9/11.
stage. Okay, 9/11, sure. 9/11, sure. But those are also the moments that kind of break you back into reality. Those are the outlying things. There are people who grow up in countries where terrorist attacks and shit like that are a daily thing. Where they, or even if you want to bring it back to a smaller scale and say there are people that grow up in the inner city where violence and being unsafe and not being able to rely on the police is an everyday reality for them. But because we exist in this situation where it's like, come on, it's not that bad. Like, I don't need a fucking gun. I understand that's the way a lot of people think, because you talk to a lot of people and you bring up like, that amendment was put there because, these guys, you have to understand, when these guys wrote that, it wasn't like a hypothetical situation to them. This country was founded off of breaking away from a tyrannical government.
Yeah.
So
like, British soldiers were just taking over people's houses to make bases and shit.
Exactly. So they wrote, and if you look at the first couple amendments in particular, they're all based off of the fact that you could tell that these guys had just broken away from a system where they saw how far it could be taken. And when they constructed this new system, the American Constitution, they wrote it in a way to, at the very best that they could, prevent that from ever happening again. And they understood that that reliance on personal security and things like that were important. This is a situation where, if for nothing else, whether or not your opinions on guns have changed either way, because I'm not a crazy gun guy either. Like, I own one. My dad has held it hostage at his house for the past 4 years. When I fucking moved from place to place, I left it in his gun cabinet until I found my new permanent residence, and then I asked for it, and he was like, no, you're not getting it back until... He literally paid for, like, tactical training for me. He was like, you're not getting it back till you complete this course and shit like that.
Damn.
And I was just like, whatever. You know what? I own a shotgun. It's legally mine. But, like, how much do I really need? I don't really care. I got other priorities I'm worried about. I'm not fucking focused on getting my shotgun. It's not a top priority in my life. At a certain point, when stuff like this happens, all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe it would be good to have, And it's crazy because it's such a wake-up call from how drastically our lives have been changed just in the short period of time that it's been.
Oh, yeah.
Like we talked about on the last podcast, but how quickly things went from like everyday life to now we're in a completely different situation. And it doesn't take that long. All of a sudden, this is the new normal. And here we are. And this is one of the few moments, just like 9/11, where everybody takes a step back and like, oh, wait. We don't live in a fucking perfect world. We don't live in a place where we can necessarily trust everyone around us or trust our government and things like that. And that's why it is good at the end of the day to not be reliant on other people and other things and just have a personal sense of security, which is why, I called up my dad and he was like, you know what, Jim? At this point, just come over and get it. Just come over and get it, because you don't know, and that's the thing. You still sound, even at this point, you sound like this crazy conspiracy theorist. Whatever. I'm 3 Coronas deep. I'm not even gonna try that word.
Yeah. Come on.
Theoreticist. I don't even know what the fucking word is. But like at this point, you still sound kind of loony, and I still don't think it's a likelihood that I'll ever need it. But there also needs to be a certain amount of appreciation for you don't know.
Yeah.
You can't rely on these things. If you would have talked to somebody a month ago and told them that this was going to be the situation on March 20, whatever the fuck it is, I don't even know what day it is anymore because I don't have anything. I have nothing to live for right now,
dude.
I have no gigs. No, I don't even know what day. It's Sunday.
It's
I think.
Crazy. Yeah.
I don't even fucking know.
I legit haven't talked to a person this long since our last podcast, probably.
Isn't it wonderful?
It's fucking crazy. We're about to do a fucking 4-hour podcast
I know, dude, just
because I
we're
got
so
so much
bored.
to talk about.
Just because it's so fucking bored. But like these are the things, and it's half beautiful and it's half not beautiful. The beautiful side of things, I think, is it really brings closer to home how much we really do rely on social connection and just being around people and being able to see people and talk to people and relate to people. And that's why you've seen these people go to these such cringeworthy measures of virtual happy hours and shit like that, just to have some sense of connection with each other. I think that's a beautiful thing that reveals about our society, especially in a society that recently has been criticized for our lack of social connection. You know? Like our with social media and things like that, kind of bringing everybody. I can turn this heater off, by the way, if you want. But cool.
Perfect. Keep my shield on.
The non-beautiful side of things is, and I don't even think it's non-beautiful at all. I think it's a necessary thing, depending on how bad this gets. But it's at this point, if it doesn't get worse, which it definitely will, but who knows how bad it'll get. At this point, it really brings people back from their kind of like matrix that they're living in, where they think everything is okay, and all the things that we hear about in history books with fucking, you know, like genocide and tyrannies and things like that. It's not just a story.
Yeah. It's
not just something that happened then that we're beyond now. It's just remanifesting itself constantly, and an intelligent, a responsible person has to understand that it's something that humanity and society is always capable of. And don't ever let yourself get into that comfort zone of thinking that your life couldn't change in a fucking instant. And that's where we're at right now. So I think, you know, in that aspect, it's also a good thing too. The downside of it is you look back at how certain things have resulted in these terrible tragedies and things like that. And the reality is we're not reading off a script. We're improv-ing this. Life is a fucking grand improv, and we're right here, right now, making the calls that we think are best right now. We don't know what's going to happen.